Well, that is that, I guess. And yeah, I don't really have a clever little intro this time around. This is not that kind of Gooner, an Arsenal podcast, and we are coming to you after Arsenal's 2-1 defeat at the Parc des Princes against PSG, making it a 3-1 defeat on aggregate in the Champions League semifinals. So we are out. We are done. It's going to be PSG facing Inter in the final, and I think that'll be a really fun clash. I'll watch it. That'll be an interesting spectacle for me. But in terms of Arsenal, that's kind of about it for us this season. We've got 3 matches left in the Premier League. We're going to Anfield, and then we're hosting Newcastle, and then I believe we're going to Southampton, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And that's it. And, we still do have something to play for. It's just that something is locking up Champions League qualification. And I think as things stand right now, we really just need 1 win out of our last 3 to do that. So really down. Really, really down at the moment. And it's especially frustrating because as I'm sure we'll get into over the course of this pod, it just feels like at least a big factor in terms of how things went down today is down to something that you could see coming for a very, very long time with this team. And it's kind of something that's been thematic of Mikel Arteta's Arsenal over the last couple of years. But we'll get into all of that, and we'll kind of go through the match, and we'll talk about what's next and maybe things that we need to fix in the summer moving forward, and yeah, just whatever else. It's going to be a little loosey-goosey today, and we'll see what we get to. But I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. You can follow me on Blue Sky at shamsdale.bsky.social. And joining me today is Drew, who you can follow on Twitter at GeeChyKid and on Blue Sky at supplyanddemanddrew.bsky.social. Drew, I'm not going to ask how you're feeling because I know the answer to that, but just tell me where your head's at. Yeah.
My head's all over the place. I feel like it was hard to see us reversing. It's not because the aggregate scoreline was insurmountable. It was more of it's just a really hard job against a very, very good team. A team who, for me, is a better, like we said before in the previous pod, a better collective team than Real Madrid was. Certainly more mentally resolute, more balanced, a better midfield, at least on the balance of form this season. It was always a tough time. After the first leg, I did not think we were going to reverse it. And that's not because I'm a defeatist, because I'm the literal opposite. But I do think if you looked at the state of play from us and the persistent problems and how PSG were very good at countering us, closing off our danger men, it was a tough task. But overall, I think there were some bright spots to this to the tie, particularly from this evening, where we can kind of look forward to for the rest of the season and into the summer, moving forward to next season. I'm disappointed in one light, but in another light, I'm not, because again, as I've said time and time again, I think I forget someone just tweeted it 15 minutes ago. I forget who it was, and I don't want to look because I don't want to check Twitter at the minute. But there's going to be a lot of nonsense discourse coming out of this result moving forward for the rest of the season, particularly in the aftermath of this before the weekend. Don't listen to it. I genuinely feel like, and I think I said it to you guys the last time I was on, so not last pod with you and John, but the time before that, where if you were to ask any Arsenal fan, would they be fine with finishing in the semifinals of the Champions League and finishing second in the league again, most people would probably take it. I think there's probably some disappointment around not winning the Premier League for right or wrong. That's okay. But no one in their right mind had us finishing top 3 in the group stage and then going on to the semifinals where we would beat Real Madrid in the process. So it's hard for me to be disappointed past a certain point. I can be disappointed in how the tie ended up being played out, but overall, in the balance of the actual campaign, I can't be sad about it. I'm proud of the team. It's still a very young team where it's clear where we're still deficient, things we need to improve on, both in terms of player quality and on the tactics board. But overall, I'm trying to find positives because maybe it's my instinct to always try to like against like the constant negativity, the constant toxicity that's sure to bubble up and was already bubbling up before we even kicked the ball. And I think I want to begin there because I genuinely feel like too many fans, even in moments when they should be supporting the club and the players, they will try to build narratives that they can point to before a ball is kicked, and I cannot stand it. After, and let's be clear, so after Inter's like phenomenal result yesterday, which for me that's one of the best knockout ties across the leagues I've ever seen in Champions League, and I've been watching football since I don't know the early '90s because I'm old.
For me, it's the best.
Yeah, it could be.
Best I've ever seen.
Depending on when someone starts watching the sport or whatever, that's it's top 3, top 5 at the minimum. For me, it's up there. It had everything, right? So I think for me, when you look at that, I saw people already saying, "Look at what Lautaro Martinez done over to you, Odegaard," and I'm just like, That's the rhetoric you're already spewing 24 hours beforehand. And now people will try to say, well, our captain didn't. And it's just like, I cannot stand that people were already looking for divisive talking points before the second leg started, when all we needed was full support for the team, for every single player. So I think even going into tonight, I was already frustrated because you could see it. You could see it if we didn't win, if Odegaard didn't bag a hat trick, if Saka didn't bag a hat trick, or whoever didn't perform or whatever. It was already going to be just this constant toxic spewing of nonsense on repeat for like the next 3 weeks. So my mood was already soured, and I didn't want to have like a sour mood going into this. But yeah, like I said, overall, I'm proud of the team for how far we've come, especially because of the circumstances we were dealt this season, which have clearly affected us on the pitch, clearly affected us mentally. You can see some of the players lacking confidence and belief as well, despite how well we've done considering. So, yeah, I just feel like I'm not angry at the team or at the result. I think there's things that could be better. It should be better, that we do need to take the blame for. But also, PSG is just a very good team. And I do think across the tie, the team that deserved to win just about deserved to win, despite some talking points that we'll get onto where you could make the argument that maybe we deserve to go through. But yeah.
I'm more mad at the club than I am at Arteta or the players currently. Right. And that's something I'll expand on in a bit. But kind of to your point about online behavior and people reacting to the match before it's even happened, I just think some people are too online. I think some people really let the online fan experience mold how they behave and how they react to some things. If you are listening to this and you're an online, like you're a really online fan, like I'm right there with you. I spend way too much time on Twitter, but when we're done recording this pod, I'm gonna go have dinner. And then I'm going to go for a walk with my wife. I'm probably going to try to talk her into ice cream somewhere, right? And I'm going to look forward to other things in my life that I'm doing. And, I'm just, it's about kind of just remembering to be a real person every once in a while. And I think, for so many people, their fan experience basically is, I don't want to get bantered online by rival fans. I think that's the first thing people think about whenever things go wrong for Arsenal. Tomorrow's going to be a shit show. You think today is bad? Tomorrow's going to be awful because we're probably going to watch United and Spurs make the Europa League final. And then we're going to have to sit there and watch people, throw this fit and be like, oh no, like Spurs and United, one of them's going to win a trophy and Arsenal won't this season. And I don't care about the Europa League. I never have. I never will. And I think people are really just finding reasons to work themselves up in advance over all this. Today's really fucking disappointing. But like you said, Drew, I think people do these things and kind of try to set themselves up for disappointment. Whether that's to kind of turn around and say, I told you so, or if that's to kind of already emotionally divest and kind of steel themselves for disappointment because they don't want to feel the full brunt of it. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's kind of the worst part with all this is that 2 months ago, when Jesus was out for the season, when Havertz went down for the season, when Saka was still injured, when Martinelli just pulled his hamstring, would be out for a month, people were saying they're just like, oh, well, the season's over. What are we going to do now? And 2 months later, we beat Real Madrid soundly to get into the semifinals of the Champions League. We're still in second place. And because we lost to maybe the best team left in the Champions League, people are going to overreact and kind of, petition the club to burn it all down and start again and ask for people to get fired and target certain players who had an okay game. That's not good enough in these situations, but they weren't awful. And yeah, it's just disappointing. So I'm probably not going to be online that often, or at least maybe I'll move over to Blue Sky for a couple days and see how that goes. But yeah, it is what it is. The fan base is how they behave, and my recommendation is just to go do the things that make you happy. If Arsenal's not making you happy right now, so
Yeah, no. Thankfully, I've got work always keeping me busy, so there's that. I spend a lot of time with my family. It's one of those moments where I wish I wasn't in the U.S. right now because I'd be in a happier overall space to cope with football rather than being here. But yeah, you're not wrong. I do feel like detoxing from what's going on will help anybody kind of not get sucked into the pervasiveness of some of the stupid discourse you'll see on Twitter. And usually it's just Twitter. I don't normally see it on Blue Sky or any other social media platform. Even Reddit is far more sensible, which is hilarious because Reddit is an absolute just crapshoot. Sometimes it's what you get. But yeah, well, there's one talking point I wanted to bring up, and I do kind of feel like, and it goes back to what I said about like the narratives. And I know John can't be here tonight, so I don't want to speak for him, but I know John and I did not agree with Ødegaard today. And one of the points I've been trying to make, and this goes into I think something that we can all agree about when it comes to our overall patterns of play and how we perform on the pitch, particularly in an attacking sense, is I did not think Ødegaard was bad today overall. I think there were moments where you could tell where he started to overthink, particularly after the first PSG goal. I think you could tell that he started to do the whole taking too much time on the ball, maybe not passing a bit quicker. But I think before that, we saw much more, rather performance much closer to what we would expect. The way he had that instinctual shot that Donnarumma did exceptionally well to save. He looked very, very bright. Most of our players looked bright, and I think that goal deflated a lot of our players, in fairness, which kind of reverts back to the first leg, in the first goal. But my overarching point that I've always said is that even your best creative players have to be given the chance to create. And what I mean by that is if you look at some of the data from the match, I think Ødegaard completed 88% or 89% of his passes. That's actually very good. And I think the only person that completed more than 25 passes that had a higher percentage passing rate was Vitinha, who was absolutely sensational in that match. So, and I think Vitinha was also the only attacking player apart from Ødegaard that had the most passes into the final third. So for both PSG and Arsenal, the leading passers into the final third were actually defensive-minded players. Either they were actually defenders or they were the sixes, making more penetrative passes. So Vitinha and Ødegaard were the only attacking players that actually had, I think it was 4 or more passes into the final third.
Yeah.
So I do think Ødegaard was trying his actual best. But the issue I have, and you saw it, not just when Ødegaard was on the ball, but the cross from Saka that we didn't, right before the half, you had other moments where when players aren't making themselves available during a run of play, when they're standing around and not trying to exploit space or making runs off the ball or giving a creative player as a runner, there's not much more that player can do. And it wasn't just Ødegaard that was affected by that. Saka was affected by that as well a few times today, where there was a moment where we could have had a dangerous ball into space or a better crossing option present itself, and they didn't. And at that point, you have to ask yourselves, well, is it the players that are the problem, or is it the mentality of the players around them that's the problem, or is it the system, or is it a combination of all three? And that's why I get so frustrated, where I do think sometimes fans expect the main creator or the best 2 or 3 players to always just create something out of nothing. It's very hard to create something out of nothing, especially when you're playing against teams that are just very good. PSG defended us very, very well broadly across the 2 legs. They knew how to close down space. They knew how to close off passing lanes. They isolated Saka, I don't even know how many times across 2 legs. Constantly Saka was 2v1 or 1v2, 1v3. Someone would slide over and help out defending Saka and cutting him off from really getting into a lot of dangerous moments a lot of the time. So I think there's so much context surrounding the things we could have done better. But it also speaks to the fact that we just need players that I think sometimes they need a better footballing IQ in terms of how to create dangerous moments. And it's not just how do you create dangerous moments when you're in possession singularly, but also how do you create dangerous moments that the person who's in possession can exploit for you. And that goes back to that Saka pass where you had that ball across the face of the goal. We didn't get a runner onto it. And you can tell that Saka was frustrated, right? Martinelli didn't really attack it. You had our center forward, Mourinho, who was actually in a more left 8 zone instead of trying to attack that ball across the face of the goal. And that's one of those moments where I think back to say, yes, Arsenal has overperformed its XG this season by 17%. And in this tie, we had over 5 XG, but only scored 1 goal. And in this game in particular, we created the most XG in a single game against PSG than any other team in the Champions League this entire season. And you can then say, yes, well, if we're creating XG, it means we're doing something right. But it also means that you can have a high XG, but not turn up in the key moments to finish the chances, if that makes sense. You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
Having a high XG number is great. And it means you're on the right track. But I think PSG's total goal XG from their 3 goals is something like 0.21 from the 3 goals across the tie. So they had a certain degree of luck. And I think you need a certain degree of luck in football as well. But my point has always been having a high XG is great, but Arsenal too many times this season in general did not score in the big moments when they should have, XG aside. And there was a few times we saw it today. Rice's header, when he headed it wide, that probably should have been a goal.
Yep.
We've had the chance for Martinelli. That probably should have been better. We had Odegaard's chance. I removed that because that was just a nut save where I think 8 or 9 times out of 10, it's actually a goal that Odegaard could have scored. That's not really his fault. You had that dangerous ball from Saka where that won't get registered as an XG. But if a more instinctual center forward is in that zone, they make that run. And as much as I despise him as a person, as a player, or as 2 players, Aubameyang and Lacazette probably attacked that ball way better than Martinelli did. How many times did we see Aubameyang make those near post runs, make those far post runs? And even if he doesn't get the ball, he's showing the run, which means the defense has to be wary of someone making those runs. And if you do that, that gives the opposition defense more to think about in terms of how the other team's going to create, and then you have the ability to exploit different spaces in the final third when you're giving another team something to think about. I think there's so many different variables about how we can tweak our attack moving forward, which is something you mentioned just before we started recording about how we can be a better team overall. So, and I think that this tie proves that perfectly to me as to where it's not just about getting better players in, which we know we need as a better center forward, probably an upgrade at left wing. I think we can all agree about both those points. But also when you get those players in, how you tweak the system to maximize the chances you get with those better players. It's all well and good if you get better players. If you're not doing what you can to platform them the best way you can, it's basically wasted money. So I think overall that's probably where I'm frustrated in terms of the team and also Arteta, because we become so rigid tactically that a lot of the players aren't themselves looking at the run of play and saying, well, if I'm supposed to be here, this is where I'm supposed to be, and I'm not doing anything else, rather than saying, oh, wait, no, there's a chance to attack space here. I need to go and do that.
Yeah.
So the players have to understand there's got to be some freedom within the overall box to where they can do things that are slightly outside of the tactical scope that will still benefit us during the run of play. And this turned into a large rant. I'm sorry for that, but that's kind of where I'm at the minute. So
Yeah, I just think I think this match was basically an encapsulation of the story of Arsenal's season. And we've seen this time and time again. Arteta came out after the match and basically said, we were the better team, but they had the best goalkeeper and the best strikers. And he said a variation of that countless times at this point, right? And that's kind of the story where we create a bunch of chances and we generate more XG, we generate more final third entries, we have more possession, we take more shots, we miss more big chances, and we have nothing to show for it in a lot of these big games, right? I'm looking at the stats on FOTMob right now from the game. We had 54% possession. We had 3.14 expected goals to PSG's 1.74. We took 19 shots to their 11. PSG actually had more shots on target than we did. They had 6, we had 4. We missed 4 big chances. Oh, sorry. We created 4 big chances. They created 2.
That's that. Period. That's my point. The point is when you create that many big chances and only score one of those goals in critical moments, that's where we've fallen short. I don't mean to interrupt, but there's a point someone brought up on Twitter who you probably know him, Clerkenwell Gunnar, who I always interact with. He's a really great chat. He was saying there's 25 odd games this season where we've not scored more than once. 3 cup ties we exited where we dominated XG and chances but still fell out, and it's because those key moments we did not capitalize our chances. Yep. That for me is it's such a microcosm explanation of where we've fallen short this season, beyond the injuries, beyond the shitty VAR calls, beyond the red cards. That for me is telling, but I wanted to add to your point while you continue.
But so I think that's part of it, right? And I do think a failure to capitalize on these big chances is endemic for us. And this goes back throughout the season. I mean, just think about the Havertz performance against United, and we missed a few chances as well against Newcastle in the Carabao Cup. But PSG missed both big chances that they created, and we missed 3 of our 4. And I think kind of that's part of what I'm getting at here is that PSG, I don't think their finishing was that great, honestly, across both legs. I mean, Barcola missed a sitter in the first leg. I mean, he screwed up a couple pretty enticing chances this time around. They PSG in like kind of as a collective missed a lot of clear-cut chances, but the thing is, their 3 goals, their 3 goals were just them really making the most out of these small XG opportunities, right? These half chances. Dembele's goal, right? I'd imagine that's single digits in terms of percentage.
Yeah, it was like 0.07 or something like that.
Yeah. And then Fabian Ruiz's goal, right? That's a half volley from outside the box. That's a pretty low XG chance. And then Hakimi, probably a little bit higher, but still you have to bend it around a man who's in front of you to get into the bottom corner. Like I don't see an Arsenal player scoring that consistently.
No.
And
to give you the numbers, it was 0.07 for Hakimi and Dembele and 0.04 for Ruiz. So it was a combined 0.18.
Yeah.
3 goals.
And that's the thing, right? Because if you look at how we play, at how we attack, I was going through the chances that we generated against PSG, and sure, Saka missed one that was like 0.91 xG or something, and then he put away another that was about the same. Timber missed a header that was 0.34. Rice missed that Rice header was like 0.14, 0.16, something like that. But after that, we missed a bunch of chances that were like 0.07, 0.04, 0.03, 0.07, right? And, just how I understand the way we attack is we go out wide, we either try to cut the ball back in or we cross it. And we try to generate these little half chances. And if you create 15, 20 of these half chances per game, one of them, maybe two of them, maybe three of them goes in the back of the net as just, a matter of the law of averages. And yet, like you said, we have all these games where we didn't put the ball in the back of the net as often as we should have. And that's because we're relying on inefficient players to really capitalize on these, fractional chances that we're generating. So yeah, we do need attacking talent who's efficient, that are efficient, right? We do need guys who will create moments out of thin air, but we also do need to have a rethink of how we attack. Because like you said, we're not generating these good enough chances for the team. And the way that we play is easy to defend against, and it's, there's not enough central progression. We don't force defenders to make enough decisions. And yeah, there's just so much that needs to be changed about what we do in the final third over the course of, the coming few months. So, this game for me really was something of a referendum on what we do in the final third, because, once again, we blew a team out of the water in terms of XG, but what do we have to show for it? And yeah, it's just my wife said to me when the game ended, she was like, "You don't seem that upset," and I was just like, it feels like I've been watching someone tied to the train tracks with a train just coming at like 5 miles an hour for the last 30 minutes or something, and there's been a saw right there for them and they haven't picked it up. So yeah, like, after a certain period of time, like I don't have anything left in terms of like being upset. I've seen this coming for so long. So yeah, it's disappointing. And these are kind of the margins. Like in the Premier League, you can maybe get away with this, right? But it's like in the Champions League or in other knockout tournaments, it's about moments.
And not
they
even
produce the
not,
moments
not
needed.
just Premier League, only parts of the Premier League, because good Premier League teams will also score low XG chances. I think that just comes down to quality. The one of the goals I absolutely hate that always happened, but I have to tip my hat, is I forget what season it was. Had to have been 4 or 5 seasons ago, because I don't think I had moved down to North Carolina yet. Was when Harry Kane scored that like belter of a bending effort from outside the box from the left half space, and he went far post top corner with it, and that actually had to be like 0.03 or something ludicrous like that. But such was his quality that he still scored. And sometimes I do feel like our insistence of rigidity and keeping possession and not risking things bites us, because I still maintain if you get one or two more runners in the front four, we have to then change how we play, or else just wasting what they can do. So like, let's just, I don't want to bring up names, but I'm going to do briefly. Let's just say the club go out this summer and they bring in Gyökeres and they bring in, I don't know, I don't want to think right now. So let's just say it's Neco Williams, right? Guys that want to get into space. They have good pace. They want to have a go. They want to be direct. And we're still relying on this very methodical, very regimented, very safe attacking system. You're going to waste those players, right? But we know we also have players in the team that can make those passes. We know Odegaard and Saka and Ben White and even the center backs and Rice can make those passes. They can exploit space. They can play a longer ball. They can play a risky pass, and it can come off. And if you don't allow us to do that, and that's how you create high XG chances as well. High XG chances aren't just, Saka, cuts in and crosses the ball. Sometimes a high XG chance is playing a ball into space. You get a 2v1, and then the winger slides over to your center forward who taps in from 2 yards out. That's a high XG chance. We don't do that nearly enough, right? We don't have that dynamic into our attack that gives teams more cause for concern. right? So I do feel like I agree with you. How we perform over this tie is a referendum, and we do have to change how we play. And certainly, I'm fine with how we play defensively. I'm even fine with how we can play transitionally some of the time. My concern is the same one I had in the late Wenger years. Was we were too predictable in the final third. We became too easy to defend against broadly across the season, and too many teams can analyze how we play and figure out how to shut us down. And you know, sitting second in the Premier League, I think we have the second most draws in the Premier League this season. We've drawn 13 times, if I remember, without looking at the table.
Yeah.
That's a lot. If you take two or three, if you take half those draws and turn them into wins, that's 12 extra points. All of a sudden, the gap to Liverpool is not that big. So I do feel like we're lacking that extra 2 or 3%. That I agree, it's not just players; it's the broader context of how we play, like who we are on the pitch. And I think this match showed a lot of that as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I was talking with John yesterday about how against Bournemouth at the weekend, we dropped points again, and it that match made it 21 points dropped from winning positions in the league this year, and we were kind of talking about factors that go into that. And my theory was we don't extend leads as often as we should. We don't take advantage of that game script that scoring first creates, where now teams have to come at you and play you, and we don't hit them on the counter. We don't take advantage of the openness that game state creates, and we miss these chances that we really should be putting away on a more consistent basis. And I said earlier that I'm more upset with the club than I am with Arteta and the players, and that's mostly because kind of a subplot in this theme of us not being good enough in the final third this season is what we did in our last two transfer windows.
Mm-hmm.
The one attacking player that we have to show from the last two transfer windows is Raheem Sterling on loan, who Arteta now very clearly would rather play an 18-year-old and a left back over. And I just think that I think that kind of sums it up in terms of how badly we've screwed it up in terms of bringing in a player who can bring us over the top in terms of attacking quality. And yeah, I understand that some players that we are interested in just weren't available. I think after a certain point, you have to stop chasing perfectionism in your attacking recruitment. And you just have to sign the best options out there, right? Victor Osimhen is playing in Turkey right now. And I think he'd be a great fit for us.
Oh man, I just got into this debate on Twitter. I can't revisit this because he's probably like the one center forward I wouldn't touch. And it's not because I don't think he's a good player, but I think there's too many things off the pitch that have led him from Napoli to Galatasaray.
Well, clearly we felt the same way.
Right. But I do think overall, though, I think so many fans just want to live and die on the hill of go get Isak this summer. If you can't get him, any other player that you're going to look at in the market will come with some kind of risk. Either they might not be the perfect stylistic fit, or they might not be the perfect age profile, whatever it is. They might not come from a top 3 league. They might come from a top 7 league, whatever it is. I agree that there are going to be players out there that can actually make us better, but you have to understand that any transfer is going to be a risk, and even the transfer from one player to another is a risk, right? So I agree with you that perfectionism doesn't exist on a football pitch unless you're Lionel Messi, basically, or whoever. Yeah. So
every player is a risk. That's why Isak is worth 120, 130 million pounds, right? Because there's only one major risk with him, and that's
injury.
A slight. Yeah, it's a slightly. I don't even think it's that really much of a concerning injury history, but yeah, he does have one, and that's it. But outside of him, you're looking at Watkins, who's going to turn 30 next season. And then you have Gyökeres, who is playing in the
Questions about
Portuguese
league standard is
exactly.
Yeah.
Like you don't know if he can do it at this level. And then you have Šeško, similar issue, but also he's young. And then you have Ekitike, same issue, right? And then Delap, and I can go down the list, right? But at some point, you just have to say we need someone, and we will work with the issues that they have, and we will build around it. But Havertz and we don't even know what Jesus is going to look like when he comes back. Jesus might be finished when he comes back. It's not enough. You have to go get a killer. You have to go get a guy who's going to put the ball in the back of the net. Even if he has to just split time with Havertz, I'll take that. Right. But, and then you have to go sign someone at left wing who can take over for Martinelli and, at least force Martinelli to compete with him. And, I think there's a lot of options out there. There's Nico Williams, there's Bradley Barcola. There's Antoine Semenyo, right? So, I guess what I'm saying is just we've kicked the can down the road for too long on this, and time is finite when it comes to these projects. You have guys like Saka and Rice and Saliba. These are Ballon d'Or shortlisters. They're not going to stick around if they feel like the team is not doing everything in their power to try to win trophies. So,
players leave even when you do win trophies, and I don't want to knock on the fan base, but Trent is leaving Liverpool.
Yeah.
For a bigger club, and he won things at Liverpool. So what's to say like someone like Saliba won't leave Arsenal if Real Madrid come calling, because they will. And that's also just the cyclical nature of professional sports, where if your sole aim is to get to the highest possible level before you retire, it's inevitable that we're going to lose our best players. So the only thing we can do is try to win as much as possible while we have them.
Yeah. One
club men are very rare, and Saliba isn't even a one club man because he didn't come through the academy. So he certainly owes no allegiance to us at all. I've always been of the opinion I don't know if Saka will ever leave. If he did, and he never won any silverware with us, I do think we that's like a massive disservice to not just the player, but the club in general, because how often do you get a generational talent or potential generational talent come through your academy and then you do nothing with it at this level? That would be frustrating. And then that you would have to levy even further criticism and frustration towards the club on the whole. So
that's another thing. Like I was watching Saka today against PSG, and he was trying so hard to put the team on his back at the end there.
At like 70%. He's not even 100%.
No.
And he still was trying, still scored a goal. Maybe should have scored another, but that's neither here nor there. But you could tell
definitely should have, but I'll forgive him for it.
Fair. But you could tell the will was there, and I do think at some point, players will say like, how I want to get over the line as well. And if they can't do it here, they'll go somewhere else to do it. So
yeah, and I was screaming at the TV, like, someone help him. Why is it every time he touches the ball he has to beat 2 to 3 people, So yeah, I don't know. It's just I think the thing that is really getting people worked up is knowing that this project is now on the clock, right? Honeymoon era, or the honeymoon period's over. This isn't 21, 22, 23, where we're just enjoying the ride. Like now we are hitting those years that this really has to turn into something. And I think this season I can forgive just because of the amount of misfortune we've had to deal with. But starting this summer, Arsenal really have to start treating this as, a win now project. No more saying, "Oh, we're going to wait for our guy to become available." No, you have to bring in the guy now, right? And if it's a different guy, go bring them in, because Odegaard's 26, Saka's going to be 24, Rice is going to be 26, Saliba's going to be 24. These guys are getting older, and like you said, whether it's trophies, whether it's just wanting to change things up, whether it's recognizing that their careers are short and they want to do as much as possible as they can with it, players will leave. You don't the the Liverpools of the world where you get Trent and Salah and Van Dijk for 9 to 10 years. That's really rare. So, I think that's just kind of where my frustration with Arsenal lies. But kind of, on the same token, like you said, I think there are reasons to be positive and reasons to like I in the hooligans group chat for with that we're in with all the other podcasts on the network. Shout out to the Hooligan Podcast Network, by the way. I got asked by Gary Stryker how I felt going into the game, and I said a cocktail of nerves, confidence, and pride. And the first two, I think those are self-explanatory, but the pride I feel is because I didn't expect this at the beginning of the season, right? Second, like, I was hoping for first, second, that's fine. Although considering what we've had to deal with, that's also pretty impressive if we hold on to it. But to make the semifinals of the Champions League, to beat Real Madrid on the way there, without either of our first choice strikers, with a 70% fit Saka because he missed 3 seasons, playing a midfielder at number 9, not having really...
Right, because Saka did not miss 3 seasons. If he missed 3 seasons,
3 months.
He'd
3
be
months. It felt like 3 seasons.
It did feel like 3 seasons.
Yeah, sorry, missed 3 months. But, not having a right back to spell Urian Timber, starting an 18-year-old midfielder at left back, not having our starting left center back, these just a lot of bad injuries piling up. And then in the league, I would say we had 11 points taken off of us by just wholly unfit for purpose refereeing. And so to have had the season that we had, I know it's really disappointing not to reach the finish line, but I am proud of the resilience that the team has shown there. And so, that is something I'm going to take with me moving into the summer, moving forward into next season, is remembering what some of these guys really showed when the pressure was on, when people were asking for them to deliver, even when the circumstances were far from ideal. I'm pretty proud of how the season went, and it's going to take a second for me to kind of get over the disappointment, but yeah, man, I think a lot of those guys really fought for the badge and justified their right to wear it. But is there anything kind of from our performance in the Champions League or from this match that you find yourself feeling good about?
Oh, like I said before, I think the signs are there. We've shown we can compete at this level. I think if you reach semifinal of the Champions League, you can't fluke a semifinal of Champions League appearance. You can fluke it in the Conference League. You can maybe fluke it in Europa League and Champions League.
You could fluke the Europa League at this point.
You for sure can, and that's not to dismiss United as Spurs, but also they're both bottom third teams in the Premier League currently, about to probably going to win the Europa League. So maybe you can fluke it, but like I said before, a lot of the data points to the fact that we can compete. Again, I think against PSG, we probably performed well against them compared to other teams that played them. I think we performed against them better than Liverpool did. I think that's takeaway. Again, we got further into the Champions League than Liverpool, then City, then Real Madrid. I think that is a sign of things that hopefully are to come. I just think overall, like to begin the show, there's very little across a broad discussion plan that I can be disappointed with in terms of how we performed in Champions League this season. Literally nothing. You know what I mean? Like, I would be furious if we had performed in a way that Liverpool did it. Had we topped Champions League group and then immediately got knocked out, I'd be furious. I think I'd be angry with that. But with how we performed, no, I just don't. You go to an Atalanta who are notoriously difficult to play against at home. You come away with a draw. You narrowly lose to Inter, who were literally in the final, and then beyond that, you finish top three, you put yourself into a semifinal. What would I possibly have to be upset about? And we didn't just completely like collapse like a flan in the cupboard against PSG. I think we had moments where our inexperience showed, yeah, but I think overall we still comported ourselves well. That's shown by the amount of chances we created, across both legs. So I think, again, the way we handled the pressure against playing Real Madrid, not just at home, but going to the Bernabeu and not faltering at a ground where bigger clubs than us will go to and lose, I think shows a lot of maturity, even though we've also had moments where we've shown our immaturity. I do think overall it's just hard to be upset about it. I'm far more disappointed with the Premier League, but again, even with that, contextually speaking, I understand why we're sitting in second. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I do agree with you. I think I was just talking to Mike Stafford before. He's in one of our group chats, and he's with the Athletic, and he was saying, in his opinion, going into the summer, it does feel like next season could be make or break. And that doesn't mean I think if we don't win anything next season that I want Arteta sacked or anything. But what I do think it means is if we don't win anything next season, I think we're in real risk of actually losing one or two really big key pieces. So I do there's all this murmuring, and one of the things, like I said before, one of the things that sucks at my job is I see a lot of transfer rumors come in on a daily basis whenever I work. But when I do see things like the Athletic talking about people being interested in our key players, then I'm like, oh, that's actually legitimate. Then, do you know what I mean? So I don't want to as the mumblings around people like Saliba or Gabriel, continue throughout the summer. I was just in a conversation before of someone asked, would it be wise to sell Saliba for big money now because you can stretch that big money and stretch out the quality of the team long term? Would you do that? And it's an interesting question to think about because there's so much pressure on us going into the summer to deliver a near perfect summer transfer window. It's hard to see how we're going to actually, because I think there's a lot to do. We have to extend certain contracts we need to extend. We have to sell really well to maximize profit on players we're letting go that aren't walking out for free. And then we have to make sure we're bringing as close to possible the players we need for the project on price points that aren't going to absolutely cripple us if it fails.
Yeah,
it's a lot of questions, and I know Bertha will probably be better at running the ship on those talking points than Edu will be, but it doesn't mean that the task at hand still isn't a considerable one. It's a huge summer. I think fans will eventually come to grips with that actual reality pretty soon. That this, and I think we've all said it before on the podcast, that this summer might make or break the entire cycle that we've been going on since Arteta came in. Yeah. Where I agree with you, we have to look at next season as a season where the aim has to be to win a major trophy. It can't just be FA Cup. So I'd love another FA Cup, sure, but it's got to be win the league or make another push in Champions League and get it over the line next season. It's got to be one of those. And the business required to put us in the position to guarantee that just got even harder because Liverpool retained two of their three players that might be walking away. We know City aren't going to fuck around. That they're going to spend however much money to make sure that they have another go again next season. If Newcastle retain Isak, they're instantaneously another club we have to consider, as a rival. It's a monumental task ahead. After getting knocked out today, my brain is immediately going to, I don't necessarily care about if we finish second. I think we'll still do it, but if we finish third, it doesn't really change much. Finishing second and third this season doesn't change much for me. We're still in Champions League. You're still top three. The money is still there for you. It's more about how the club are going to look at this season and how their viewpoint of how we're going to improve going into next season. To me, that says everything. How the club handles the summer tells me everything.
Yeah.
And my mood will be going into next season will be entirely shaped around that. And that's kind of where my brain's already at the moment. So,
yeah. I agree. It's going to be a really big summer. And I think Arsenal have already shown that they recognize that by bringing in Berta. Because I think if they viewed this summer as one where they could get away with what they did in the previous summer and just, sign a couple backup players and sign some guys on loan just to plug the holes, I think they would have stuck with Ato, to be honest. But I think the fact that they brought in a guy who worked at Atletico Madrid, who's been at the highest level of the game, who is extremely experienced, right, and probably cost them a pretty penny. I think that shows that they know they have to get this right. So, we'll see what happens. And yeah, I mean, I agree. There's a lot to do. You gotta extend Saka, although that sounds like that's about done. You gotta extend Saliba. I think we're probably looking at extensions for Lewis Skelly and Wineri. You need a striker. You need a winger. You probably need a 10. You need a 6. Backup goalkeeper. Maybe probably a defender if Kivior leaves. And yeah, no, it's a lot to do. But I think you kind of that's kind of part and parcel of being at this level, where you have to bring in this number of players and you have to bring in this quality of players. But B, I think we kind of put ourselves in this position by, maybe I'm putting this a little too unkindly, taking last summer off for all intents and purposes. Obviously, we were doing legwork and we were trying and we were in negotiations, but, last summer I think was an abject failure, to say at this point. So, I don't have as much sympathy for the club because these are a couple of these things they could have gotten over the line last year and they chose not to, or they weren't able to. So yeah, there's a lot to do this summer. I'm still optimistic, right? And part of that's just because I don't really know any other way to exist. If I was just sitting there thinking to myself, oh well, Arsenal are going to screw it all up and all this has been for nothing, then I wouldn't even make content about it, to be honest.
No.
So I think we're going to get it right. I think we're going to have a couple pleasant surprises in the transfer window. And, we can get into kind of what exactly we're expecting from that on another day. But, as we begin to kind of like wind this down and wrap up here, is there anything else that kind of comes to mind that you want to talk about from this match, or kind of the immediate outlook of the season?
No, not really. I just kind of feel like maybe one thought I was having is, and I think this is kind of connected to what we were just talking about, is the fact that even if we had Kai in the lineup for these two guys, I don't think that changes anything. As much as I love him as a player and as much as I rate him as a key part of how we operate, I think he suffers from the same deficiencies that we're already suffering from. Do you know what I mean? And I think that shows why I feel like we have to raise the ceiling in the summer. Why the club have to look at the project now and say, we just have to bring in better. And I do feel like it's funny because this is connected to the first one I had. At no point have I ever been like a KSE out person. I've never, those words have never been uttered out of my mouth. I've never typed those with my fingers. That's never how I've been. But I do think for the first time this summer, I do kind of feel like it would be nice if we got some kind of support from them that we kind of see from some other ownership groups, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're capable of it because we see how they've operated. It's slightly different when you factor in North American sports, but you have seen them kind of, what's the term I'm looking for, where the bar will be raised when they feel like it's time for whatever franchise they're overviewing needs to kick on and then go on and deliver. And you can see them kind of like put it into overdrive, so to speak. I do think we need to see that from them now specifically. So I think that's kind of tied into what I said before about there's so much pressure on us now. I do feel like it can't just come from the fans or Arteta. or Berta, I think it has to come from the ownership. I think the ownership has to say, "Look, like this is the season now," kind of thing.
Yeah.
If you get what I mean, I think it's
No,
really important. So
they've got to have their Von Miller and Odell Beckham Jr. signings this
yeah,
summer.
I mean, I'm not a football guy, but we'll go with that. But yeah, no, they do.
Those are the two guys that they brought in the season that they won the Super Bowl.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah,
And they dropped big money on them. These are guys that clearly weren't going to be there for long,
right.
but they dropped the money on them in the hopes that they would, get them over the line, and they did.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to push back a little bit on the Havertz thing. I think he would have changed things a little bit for us. I'm not saying he would have had a hat trick or anything, but I think the one thing you can always count on Havertz to do is occupy the center backs and to really force him to make decisions in terms of whether or not to follow him or to kind of stay where they are. And I think his movement in the box is some of the most intelligent in football, to be honest. So I think at the very least, we would have at least had a little bit more space in the box, and we would have created maybe a couple more chances. Maybe he puts away one of them. I think it's equally likely that he doesn't.
Right.
But I think, and that's that's where I'm with you in terms of we need to bring in another guy. But I do think I've seen people say that Marino kind of shows that Havertz was a pointless signing.
I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah.
No, I think that's nonsense. My point was, I agree with you. Havertz may have changed particular game states or offered a different dynamic, which we maybe could have used as a springboard. But my point was, by saying he doesn't change anything, is I still think we go out to PSG even if he was playing. That's what I mean. I don't think we would have gotten past PSG even if he was there. I think our chances could have improved. I think we probably would have scored maybe another goal across the tie, but I just think PSG, they're in the Champions League final for a reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They got by a team in the knockout stage that are better than us, whether we like or not. Liverpool are a better team than us this season. We have to just live with that reality. As much as I don't want to live with it, they are where they are in merit. And they're just very, very, very good. And so, yeah, it's just hard for me to think that Kai Havertz tips the scale from PSG to us. I think he just makes the scale slightly closer in the tipping. That's all. So
yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I think I'm about in agreement there. Why don't we go ahead and wrap it up there then?
Yep.
And I don't know, just a sad day, and it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna take a little bit to kind of feel, like talkative again, I guess, about Arsenal. But yeah, I mean, I know we'll get there, but yeah, we'll put a bow on it here, and we've got Liverpool at the weekend, of course, because why not? I'm not going to really let that result have much of a sway on how I feel, to be quite honest, unless we lose badly. But I feel like something tells me that we'll play angry at Anfield, so we'll see. But yeah, we'll be back with you after whatever happens at Anfield. And thank you so much for being here with us and for kind of taking the time to just kind of listen to this quick post-match rant / therapy session over here. And we really appreciate you guys being part of the journey. So again, you can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. You can follow me on Blue Sky at shamsdale.bsky.social. You can follow Drew at Geechee Kid on Twitter and at supplyandamandrew.bsky.social on Blue Sky. You can follow the pod on Twitter at NotThatGooner, on Blue Sky at notthatgooner.bsky.social. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Not That Kind of Gooner, and also you can follow us on Instagram at Not That Kind of Gooner. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do leave us a 5-star review. It really does help put the pod out there in front of more and more people, and we really do appreciate that. And we'll be back with you probably Monday, if I remember to actually schedule things properly this time around. And I will not double book this time. But yeah, we'll be back with you then. So, try to do whatever brings you joy that isn't Arsenal, and try to enjoy the weekend before we go play Liverpool. And until next time, take care and bye. Bye.
Secret Tuner